The conference room on the 42nd floor of Crawford Enterprises had a spectacular view of Manhattan, but Sophie Morgan could barely focus on the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her vision was blurring at the edges, and the constant buzzing in her ears drowned out the voices around the polished mahogany table. Third-quarter numbers show solid growth, Marcus, the CFO, was saying, pointing at the projector. But we need to revise the marketing strategy for the January product launch. Sophie pressed her fingers against the cold edge of the table, trying to anchor herself in the present. She'd skipped breakfast. Again. And last night's dinner had been just half a sandwich that Lily, her 7-year-old daughter, hadn't finished. 3 jobs. That was the secret Sophie hid behind her pressed suits and impeccable posture as marketing manager. Crawford Enterprises by day, remote customer service at night, weekends cleaning offices, all to cover Lily's endless medical bills, whose type 1 diabetes diagnosis had transformed their lives into an impossible equation of debt and desperation. "Sophie, do you agree?" Ethan Crawford's voice cut through the fog. Sophie looked up, forcing a professional smile. At 35, Ethan was known for 2 things: building a billion-dollar tech company before 40 and never, ever losing control of a situation. His grey eyes studied her now with that characteristic intensity that made seasoned executives squirm. Sophie had learned in her 8 months at the company to never let Ethan Crawford see weakness. "I think," Sophie began, but the words dissolved. The white ceiling above began to spin, slowly at first, then faster. She heard chairs scraping, distant voices shouting her name, and then only darkness. Sophie woke to fluorescent lights burning her eyes, and the unmistakable smell of hospital disinfectant. Immediate panic shot through her chest. Hospital meant bills. Bills meant more debt she couldn't pay. "Stay still." The voice was firm but not unkind. Sophie turned her head to find Ethan Crawford sitting in a plastic chair beside the gurney, his Italian tie loosened, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, and Sophie noticed with surprise that several strands of his dark hair were out of place. "How long—" Sophie tried to sit up, but immediate dizziness forced her back down. 2 hours, Ethan replied. "You collapsed in the middle of the quarterly meeting, hit your head on the table. We had to call an ambulance." Humiliation burned in Sophie's cheeks. "I'm so sorry. That was inappropriate. I'll cover the costs of the lost meeting." "Sophie." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "When was the last time you ate?" The question caught her off guard. This morning." "Don't lie to me." His voice was low, but there was something there beyond authority. It almost sounded like concern. "The doctors said you're severely dehydrated and malnourished. Your blood sugar was dangerously low." Sophie closed her eyes. Of course, they'd run tests. What else had they discovered? How long until her weak insurance revealed the financial chaos that was her life? "I need to leave," she said, trying to sit up again. "My daughter, Lily, she's with the neighbor, but—" "Your daughter is 7 years old and has type 1 diabetes," Ethan interrupted gently. "She uses an insulin pump. Her monthly medical bills are about $2,500, even with insurance." Sophie's blood froze. "How do you know that?" "The hospital needed your insurance. I paid your bills while you were unconscious." Ethan pulled a tablet from his leather briefcase. "And then I made some calls. Discovered some interesting things." Sophie felt tears prickling her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "You investigated my life? What kind of—" "3 jobs, Sophie." Ethan's voice was low, almost incredulous. "You work for me 40 hours a week, then go home and do remote customer service until midnight. Weekends, you clean offices in Newark." He paused. "And still you're 3 months behind on rent and owe $40,000 in medical bills." Shame flooded Sophie, hot and suffocating. "I didn't ask for your charity. I'll pay back what you spent on the hospital." "I don't want your money," Ethan said, and there was something new in his voice. Something Sophie couldn't identify. "I want to understand why one of my best employees is working herself to death, and I didn't know." "Because I'm good at my job," Sophie replied, her voice breaking despite her efforts. "Because I don't mix personal life with professional, because—" She took a deep breath. Because if anyone found out, I'd be fired. Or worse, treated like a charity case. Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. 5 years ago, my younger brother Aaron was diagnosed with leukemia. He was 18. Sophie looked at him, surprised by the unexpected revelation. I had money to pay for the best treatment in the world, Ethan continued, looking at his hands. Private doctors, experimental clinics, everything. And still he died 6 months later. He raised his eyes to meet hers. Money didn't save my brother, Sophie, but the lack of it is killing you. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken things. I can't accept your help, Sophie finally whispered. Not like this. I worked too hard to get where I am. If people find out the CEO is taking care of me, they'll think I didn't earn my position. Then let's do it differently, Ethan said, his mind clearly already working. Crawford Enterprises is launching a new pilot program. Expanded medical assistance for employees with dependents with chronic conditions. You'll be the first participant. That doesn't exist, Sophie pointed out. It will on Monday, Ethan replied without hesitation. I'm the CEO. I create programs when I want. He leaned closer. And you're going to stop the extra jobs immediately. I can't just... You're going to accept a raise, Ethan continued, relentless. Retroactive to the last 8 months. Your results justify it. Marcus reviewed the numbers with me in the ambulance. Your last project increased our sales by 18%. Sophie shook her head, tears finally escaping. Why are you doing this? Ethan was quiet for a moment, his grey eyes studying her face with an intensity that made Sophie's heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with her medical condition. Because I should have noticed, he said finally, his voice rough. You come to work every day, deliver exceptional results, never complain, never ask for help. And I was so focused on numbers and strategies that I didn't see one of my people was drowning. He stood, but didn't move away. Instead, he remained there, looking at her with something that seemed dangerously close to care. Let me help, Sophie, Ethan said softly. Not as your CEO. As someone who understands what it's like to watch helplessly while someone you care about suffers. The air between them changed, charged with a tension Sophie wasn't ready to name. Before she could respond, a nurse entered. Miss Morgan, we have some discharge formalities and... She looked at Ethan with poorly disguised curiosity. Your daughter is here. The neighbor brought her. Sophie sat up quickly, ignoring the dizziness. Lily's here. I called your neighbor, Ethan explained. Thought you'd want to see her. And then Sophie heard it. Small footsteps running down the corridor, and then Lily was there, her brown curls flying, brown eyes wide with worry. Mommy! Sophie opened her arms, and Lily threw herself into them, and for a moment nothing else mattered. Not the bills, not the shame, not the billionaire CEO watching them with an expression Sophie couldn't decipher. It's okay, sweetheart, Sophie murmured against her daughter's hair. Mummy just got a little tired. Lily pulled back, her small face serious. Mrs. Henderson said you fainted at work. You didn't eat again, did you? From the corner of her eye, Sophie saw Ethan stiffen at the mention of again. I'll be more careful, I promise, Sophie said, kissing Lily's forehead. Lily finally seemed to notice Ethan, her eyes widening. Are you the rich man from the big building? Ethan blinked, clearly not expecting that question. Then, to Sophie's surprise, he knelt to Lily's height. I am, he said, a small smile touching his lips. My name is Ethan. You must be Lily. Did you let my mum leave early today? Lily asked, with the brutal frankness of children. Actually, your mum had to leave early because she wasn't feeling well, Ethan replied, his voice gentle. But I'm making sure she takes better care of herself from now on. Lily studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if she'd reached a decision. Okay. But you need to make sure she eats. She always skips meals and thinks I don't notice. Lily, Sophie warned, her cheeks warming. I'll make sure personally, Ethan said, his eyes finding Sophie's over Lily's head. There was a promise there that made something tighten in Sophie's chest. As the nurse returned with discharge papers, and Lily chatted about her day at school, Sophie watched Ethan Crawford patiently answer her daughter's endless questions about his work, his building, and whether he'd ever met any celebrities. The billionaire CEO, known for his ruthless nature in business, was sitting in a plastic hospital chair, listening to a 7-year-old girl with genuine interest. And Sophie realized with a mixture of hope and terror that her carefully controlled life, the one where she kept everyone at a safe distance, where she didn't need anyone, was about to change irrevocably. The question was she ready to let that happen? Monday arrived with a storm of gossip at Crawford Enterprises. Sophie felt the stares as soon as she stepped off the elevator. Whispered conversations stopped abruptly when she passed. Colleagues who normally greeted her now looked away. "I heard she fainted on purpose," a female voice murmured from the break room, "to get his attention." "It's no coincidence she got a massive raise 3 days later," another voice replied. "And did you see how he was at the hospital? Marcus said Ethan didn't even come back to the office that day." Sophie tightened her fingers around her purse and kept walking. She had anticipated this. What she hadn't anticipated was the sharp pain each whisper caused. Her office somehow seemed smaller, suffocating. Sophie had just turned on her computer when a firm knock on the door made her turn. Victoria Chen, Director of Human Resources, entered without waiting for invitation. In her early 50s, with perfectly greyed hair in an elegant bun, Victoria was known for 2 things: brutal efficiency and unwavering loyalty to Crawford Enterprises. "Sophie," Victoria closed the door behind her, "we need to talk about your situation. If this is about the fainting, I already sent a medical certificate. This is about the fact that the company's CEO personally paid your hospital bills and approved a 40% salary increase without going through the standard compensation committee." Victoria crossed her arms. "Do you understand how this looks?" Sophie felt heat rising up her neck. "Ethan, Mr. Crawford mentioned that my results justified—" "Your results justify a 10, maybe 15% increase," Victoria interrupted. "Not 40, and certainly not a complete restructuring of our medical benefits program that, coincidentally, directly benefits your specific situation." "I didn't ask for any of this," Sophie said, her voice coming out more defensive than intended. "Didn't you?" Victoria leaned against the door. "So you're saying you have no personal relationship with Ethan Crawford beyond professional?" The question hung in the air, dangerous. "I barely know the man," Sophie replied honestly. "Before Friday, our interactions were limited to team meetings and quarterly reports." Victoria studied her face for a long moment. "I believe you," she said finally, her voice softening slightly. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is perception. And right now half the office believes you're sleeping with the boss, and the other half is waiting to see if you will." Sophie felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Here's my advice," Victoria continued. "Keep your head down. Deliver exceptional results. And for God's sake, keep your distance from Ethan Crawford outside necessary professional interactions." She paused at the door. "And Sophie? I really hope you prove everyone wrong." After Victoria left, Sophie sank into her chair, the reality of her situation settling like concrete in her lungs. She had spent 8 months building respect at this company, 8 months proving she was more than just another marketing professional, and now in 3 days, it was all crumbling. Her phone vibrated. A message from Ethan. "Lunch? We need to discuss the January product launch." Sophie looked at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Prefer to work at my desk, can send proposals by email." The reply came immediately. "My office, noon, not optional." Ethan's office occupied the entire northwest corner of the 45th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan, and the space was decorated with minimalist taste. Modern furniture, abstract art, no personal photographs except a single framed image of a young man smiling, whom Sophie recognized as Aaron. Ethan was standing near the windows when Sophie entered, phone pressed to his ear. He gestured for her to sit, finishing his call with characteristic efficiency. "Sorry," he said, pocketing his phone. "Hong Kong investors, they have terrible timing." Sophie remained near the door. "You said you needed to discuss the January launch?" Ethan frowned. "Sit down, Sophie." "I prefer to stand." "That's not a request." There was steel in his voice now, the CEO accustomed to being obeyed. Sophie reluctantly took a seat in the leather chair across from his desk. Ethan didn't sit. Instead, He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "Why are you avoiding me?" The frankness of the question surprised her. "I'm not. You cancelled 2 meetings this morning, refused my lunch invitation, and you're looking at me like I'm a problem you need to manage." His grey eyes studied her with that disconcerting intensity. "What happened?" Sophie took a deep breath. "People are talking, Ethan. Let them talk." "Easy for you to say," Sophie replied, frustration leaking into her voice. "You're the CEO. You're untouchable. I'm the marketing manager who fainted in a meeting and magically got a massive raise 3 days later." Understanding passed across Ethan's face. "Victoria talked to you. Victoria is doing her job, protecting the company." Sophie stood, unable to stay still. "You don't understand. I've worked at 5 different companies over the last 10 years. At each one I had to prove I wasn't just the single mum who needs days off or the employee with personal problems. I finally earned respect here, and now people know you're human," Ethan interrupted, "that you have real challenges, that you're not perfect. Why is that so terrifying to you?" "Because perfection is the only thing that keeps me employed," Sophie shot back. "Once people see my weaknesses, I become disposable." The silence that followed was heavy. "Your ex-husband," Ethan said slowly, as if assembling a puzzle. "He left when Lily was diagnosed, didn't he?" Sophie froze. "How did you—" "You mentioned at the hospital that you've been raising Lily alone for 6 years. Lily is 7. Type 1 diabetes usually manifests in early childhood." His eyes softened. Not hard to connect the dots. Sophie turned to the windows, not wanting him to see the tears threatening to fall. "Ryan said he didn't sign up for this, that he couldn't handle a life of insulin injections and medical emergencies and endless bills." Her voice broke. "He left when Lily was 15 months old, never looked back." She felt, more than heard, Ethan move to stand behind her. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Sophie, look at me." She obeyed slowly, turning to meet his eyes. "You're not disposable," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "And any man who made you believe you were is a coward, who didn't deserve you or your daughter." The air between them changed, charged with something unspoken. Sophie was painfully aware of how close he was, how his eyes seemed to see through all her carefully constructed defenses. "Ethan," she began, not knowing exactly what she wanted to say. His phone rang, breaking the moment. Ethan cursed softly, checking the screen. "I need to take this. Supplier crisis in China." He hesitated. "But this isn't over, Sophie. This conversation—" After she left his office, Sophie leaned against the corridor wall, her heart pounding. That thing growing between her and Ethan, that tension, that connection, was dangerous. Not just for her career, but for the careful balance she'd built in her life. She couldn't afford to depend on someone again, especially not a billionaire CEO who lived in a completely different world from hers. But when she finally returned to her office, she found a delivery box on her desk. Sushi from an expensive restaurant she could never afford, with a simple note in firm handwriting. "You need to eat." As Sophie looked at the note for a long moment, something tightening in her chest. She wasn't ready for this, for someone who cared, for someone who paid attention, for someone who saw her, really saw her, and didn't run away. But it seemed Ethan Crawford wasn't giving her a choice. 3 weeks later, Sophie stood in Ethan's apartment at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, holding a sleeping Lily in her arms and questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. "I'm so sorry," she said for the 3rd time, as Ethan closed the door behind them. "I know it's late and I never would have called, but Mrs. Henderson had a family emergency and had to travel, and Lily's insulin pump failed, and the pharmacy won't have a replacement until tomorrow morning, and I needed someone who could stay with her while I—" "Sophie." Ethan gently took Lily from her arms, the child barely stirring. "Breathe. You did the right thing calling me." Sophie watched, stunned by exhaustion and stress, as Ethan carried Lily to a guest bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. He laid her on the bed with surprising care, removing her shoes and pulling a blanket over her. "The 24-hour pharmacy on Madison Avenue has insulin pumps in stock," Ethan said calmly, guiding Sophie back to the living room. I called them from the elevator. They're setting one aside now. My driver can pick it up in 20 minutes. Sophie sank onto the soft leather couch, tears finally escaping. I can't afford a new pump before insurance approves, and they said it could take weeks. Already handled, Ethan interrupted gently. The equipment will be here in half an hour, paid in full. I can't keep letting you pay for things, Sophie said, her voice breaking. You've already done too much. The hospital bills, the raise, the benefits program. Sophie, look at me. She raised her eyes to find Ethan kneeling in front of her, his grey eyes intense. When Aaron was sick, I would have given everything I had, every penny, every property, the entire company, for one more day with him. His voice was rough with emotion. You have a beautiful, brilliant daughter who needs you. If I can ensure she stays healthy and you stay sane, why the hell wouldn't I do that? Because it's not your responsibility, Sophie whispered. What if I want it to be? The air between them froze. Sophie was conscious of every breath, every heartbeat. What does that mean? She finally asked. Ethan stood, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she'd learned meant he was processing something difficult. It means that for the past 3 weeks, you've become the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing at night. It means I check my phone obsessively waiting for your messages. It means... He stopped, turning to face her completely. It means I care about you, Sophie. And Lily. More than I should, considering you work for me. Sophie stood, her heart thundering. Ethan, we can't... Why not? He took a step closer. Give me one real reason that isn't what other people will think. Because I'm scared, Sophie admitted, the truth pouring out in a rush. I'm scared of depending on you, and then you realize this is too hard, too complicated, too much. I'm scared of Lily getting attached to you, and then you leave, just like her father did. I'm scared... Her voice broke. I'm scared of falling in love with you and losing everything again. Ethan closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. What if I tell you I'm scared too? That I haven't done this before? Not like this. Not with these stakes. That the idea of hurting you or hurting Lily terrifies me. He took her hands. But I'm more scared of letting you go and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Sophie looked at their intertwined hands. The contrast between his skin, smooth, cared for, and hers, rough from work and stress. The people at the company, she began. I don't care about the people at the company, Ethan said firmly. I care about you. And if they have a problem with it, they can bring their concerns to me directly. You don't understand what it's like to be the person in the office everyone whispers about, Sophie said. To be seen as someone who slept their way up. Then let's prove them wrong, Ethan interrupted. You'll continue doing the exceptional work you've always done. I'll ensure your performance review is conducted by an independent committee. We'll be professional in the office and careful about how we proceed. And after the office? Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. After the office, I'd like the chance to know you without all the protective layers you've built. I'd like to take you to dinner at places that don't serve chicken nuggets. I'd like... He hesitated. I'd like to be there when Lily wakes from nightmares, or when you have bad days, or just when you need someone you don't have to be strong for all the time. Tears streamed freely down Sophie's face now. I don't know how to do this. Let someone in. Then we'll learn together, Ethan said softly. No rush, no pressure. Just try. Give me a chance to prove I'm not going anywhere. Sophie looked toward the room where Lily slept, then back at Ethan. He had held her daughter so tenderly, had solved a problem that had paralyzed her with panic in minutes, was standing here vulnerable and honest, offering something she was certain she'd never have again. Hope. Okay, she finally whispered. One chance. The smile that spread across Ethan's face transformed his severe features into something incandescent. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in 6 years, Sophie allowed herself to lean on someone. They stood like that for a long moment, the Manhattan skyline twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, until the doorbell rang. The insulin pump, Ethan murmured against her hair. I'll get it. As he went to the door, Sophie wiped her face and went to check on Lily. Her daughter slept deeply, oblivious to the fact that their lives were about to change in ways Sophie could barely imagine. She heard voices at the door, Ethan speaking low with someone. Then a different sound, a female voice louder, familiar in a way that made Sophie's stomach drop. "Ridiculous, Ethan. The entire office is talking. You can't just—" Sophie turned to find Ethan standing in the guest bedroom doorway, his expression carefully neutral. And behind him, arms crossed and an expression of furious disapproval, stood Victoria Chen. The silence in Ethan's apartment was thick as fog. Victoria Chen stood in the living room entrance, her suit impeccable even at 11:30 at night, her eyes moving from Sophie, with her tear-stained face, to Ethan, whose jaw was clenched in a way Sophie had learned meant control dangerously close to breaking. "Victoria," Ethan said, his voice too calm, "I don't remember inviting you." "You didn't." Victoria entered the room as if she owned it. "But when the doorman mentioned that Sophie Morgan had just come up to your apartment, carrying a child at 11 at night, I thought it prudent to intervene before you did something catastrophically stupid." "Leave," Ethan said simply. Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting direct refusal. "Ethan, be sensible. You're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You can't get involved with a subordinate who—" "Choose your next words very carefully," Ethan interrupted, his voice dropping to a tone that made Sophie shiver. "Because you're seconds away from crossing a line there's no coming back from." Victoria raised her hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I'm just trying to protect you and the company. Do you understand the legal implications? The potential for sexual harassment lawsuits, allegations of favoritism, not to mention the media circus when—" "When what?" Sophie heard herself say, finding her voice. "When people find out the CEO is seeing someone, or when they find out that someone doesn't come from the same social class as him." Victoria turned to her, her eyes narrowing. "Don't make this a class issue, Miss Morgan. This is about appropriate corporate protocol." "No, this is about you deciding who's worthy of Ethan," Sophie shot back, anger finally overcoming her exhaustion. "And clearly a single mother with medical debt doesn't meet your standards." "Sophie," Ethan stepped between them, "you don't need to defend yourself to her." "Actually, she does," Victoria said coldly, "because I know things about Sophie Morgan that you apparently didn't research thoroughly enough." Sophie's stomach dropped. "No. Please, no." Victoria opened her purse and pulled out a folder. 6 years ago, Sophie was accused of insurance fraud. She filed claims for medical expenses for a pre-existing condition her daughter had that her insurance refused to cover, manipulating dates. "Stop," Sophie whispered, feeling the floor disappear beneath her feet. "The charges were dropped when she paid restitution," Victoria continued relentlessly. "But it's on her record. A woman with a criminal history, Ethan. Working at our company, having access to sensitive financial information—" "I said stop!" Sophie's voice echoed through the apartment, surprising in its intensity. A small cry came from the guest bedroom. "Mommy?" The world stopped. Sophie ran to the room where Lily sat up in bed, eyes wide with confusion and fear. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sophie said, her voice trembling as she pulled Lily into her arms. "Just adults being foolish and loud. Go back to sleep." "Why is that lady yelling?" Lily whispered. "She's not anymore," Sophie promised, even though she could hear tense voices continuing in the living room. "Stay here, okay? Mommy will be right back." When Sophie returned, Ethan stood with his arms crossed, his face a mask of contained fury, while Victoria collected her things. "Forced me to take administrative action," Victoria was saying. "She'll be placed on administrative leave effective immediately, while we conduct a full investigation." "No, she won't," Ethan said, his voice sharp as steel. "Because you no longer have the authority to make that decision." Victoria froze. "Excuse me?" "You're fired, Victoria, effective immediately." Shock passed across the older woman's face. "You can't fire me for doing my job. I can fire you for invading my home uninvited, for harassing an employee on her personal time, and for threatening to use sealed records in an unauthorized investigation." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I have legal on speed dial. Would you like to discuss this with them, or would you prefer to leave quietly?" Victoria looked between Ethan and Sophie, her face pale with anger. "You're going to regret this. Both of you will." "The door," Ethan said simply. After Victoria left, the silence that fell was deafening. Sophie sank onto the couch, her knees finally giving out. "Is it true?" Ethan finally asked, his voice careful. Sophie looked at her hands. When Lily was diagnosed, our insurance refused to cover the insulin pump, said it was a pre-existing condition even though she was 15 months old. I had no choice. Her voice broke. I had no money. She was dying. So I altered dates on some forms, making it look like symptoms had started after our insurance took effect. Ethan said nothing, just waited. They found out during a routine audit, Sophie continued, tears streaming down her face. Accused me of fraud. I faced possible jail time. In the end, I paid back every penny, took 3 years, and the charges were dropped and sealed. That's what buried me in debt. That's why Ryan left. He said he couldn't be with a criminal. You're not a criminal, Ethan said, his voice firm. You're a mother who did what she had to do to save her daughter. Sophie looked up, surprised. You think I don't understand desperation? Ethan knelt in front of her. When Aaron was dying, I would have burned the entire world if it meant one more day with him. What you did, protecting Lily, wasn't a crime. It was love. But Victoria overstepped her bounds in a way that exposed the company to legal liability, Ethan interrupted. She violated privacy protocols, accessed sealed records without authorization, and tried to weaponize personal information. I didn't fire her for you, Sophie. I fired her because she became a liability. He took her hands. But you need to understand something. I don't care about your past. I don't care about mistakes you were forced to make to protect your daughter. I care about who you are now, and the woman I know is strong, intelligent, capable, and completely dedicated to ensuring her daughter has the best life possible. Sophie couldn't speak around the knot in her throat. I fired my HR director for you tonight, Ethan continued, a small smile touching his lips. That should count for something. A sound came from Sophie that was half laugh, half sob. You're completely insane. Completely, Ethan agreed. About you. And then he kissed her, gentle and firm, a promise and a question at the same time. When they pulled apart, Sophie rested her forehead against his. People are going to talk even more now. Victoria will make sure of it. Let them talk, Ethan murmured. I'm not hiding you, Sophie. I'm not hiding this. If people have problems, they can bring them to me. From the guest bedroom, Lily's voice called, Mommy? My tummy feels weird. Maternal instinct kicked in instantly. Sophie ran to the room, Ethan right behind her. Lily sat in bed, her face slightly pale. When was the last time you checked your sugar? Sophie asked, already reaching for the testing kit. Before bed, Lily said. It was normal. Sophie tested quickly. The numbers were high, not dangerously so, but higher than they should be without the pump functioning properly. We need the new pump, Sophie said, turning to Ethan. It's in the living room, he replied. I left it on the table when Victoria showed up. While Sophie prepared the new pump, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed with Lily. Are you okay, Lily? He asked gently. Lily nodded. This happens sometimes. Mummy always knows what to do. She looked at him with those eyes too serious for a 7-year-old. Are you going to leave too? Like my dad? The question fell like a bomb in the silence. Sophie froze, her hands stopping mid-preparation. Ethan didn't flinch. No, he said simply. I'm not. How do you know? Lily pressed. Daddy said he'd stay too, but then I got sick and he said it was too hard. Ethan looked at Sophie, who had tears in her eyes, then back at Lily. You want to know how I know? Lily nodded. Because your mom is the bravest person I've ever met, Ethan said, and you're the smartest girl. And you two made me realize I was only living half a life. I'm not leaving, Lily, because there's nowhere I'd rather be than here, with both of you. Lily studied his face for a long moment, then held out her pinky finger. Pinky promise? Ethan wrapped his pinky around hers. Pinky promise. Sophie finished attaching the new pump, blinking back tears. When she was done, Ethan picked Lily up and tucked her back into bed, smoothing her hair until she fell asleep again. In the living room, Sophie collapsed onto the couch, the weight of everything finally hitting. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Promise her. That's a lot of pressure. Sophie, Ethan sat beside her. I didn't make a promise I don't intend to keep. She looked at him, this man who had turned her life upside down in 3 weeks. How is this going to work? The office, us, everything? Carefully, Ethan replied, and honestly, and together. He took her hand. I have a plan. 3 months later, Sophie stood in the same company auditorium where she had collapsed in what felt like a lifetime ago, watching Ethan Crawford walk to the podium. The entire company was assembled, over 200 people filling the chairs, whispered conversations echoing off the walls. Sophie sat in the third row, Marcus beside her, her new position as Director of Product Innovation, ensuring her a seat among senior leadership. This should be interesting, Marcus murmured. 3 months since Victoria was fired, and he still hasn't addressed it publicly. Sophie kept her expression neutral, but her stomach tightened. Good afternoon, Ethan began, his voice calm and controlled as always. I know there's been considerable speculation over the past few months about personnel changes, department restructuring, and my personal life. A rustle of discomfort passed through the room. So, let's clear some things up, Ethan continued. First, Victoria Chen was terminated for protocol violations and privacy breaches, not because she questioned my business decisions, I encourage robust debate, but because she crossed ethical lines that cannot be tolerated. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Second, there have been rumors about my relationship with Sophie Morgan, who many of you know as our new Director of Product Innovation. His eyes found hers briefly. Those rumors are correct. Sophie and I are in a personal relationship. The silence in the room was absolute. I understand this raises questions about professionalism and favoritism, Ethan said. So, here are the facts. Sophie's promotion was recommended by an independent committee based on her measurable results. Her third-quarter marketing campaign increased sales by 18%. Her product innovation strategy for the current fiscal year was unanimously approved by the board. Her performance evaluation, conducted by external reviewers, ranked her in the 95th percentile. He let that sink in. If anyone has concerns about conflicts of interest, our door is open, Ethan continued. But understand this, Crawford Enterprises is built on merit and results. It always has been, always will be. If you deliver exceptional results, you will be recognized. It doesn't matter who you know, where you come from, or who you're dating. His gaze hardened. But if I find out anyone is spreading malicious rumors about any employee, whether Sophie or anyone else, you will be held accountable. We're better than office gossip. Act accordingly. With that, he left the podium, leaving a stunned auditorium in his wake. Marcus whistled softly beside Sophie. Well, that was a statement. It was, Sophie agreed, her heart thundering. Later that evening, Sophie stood in the kitchen of her and Lily's apartment. No longer the cramped one-bedroom in a dangerous neighborhood, but a spacious two-bedroom in a secure building with a doorman who knew Lily by name, preparing dinner when the door lock turned. "We're in the kitchen," she called. Ethan entered, his tie already loosened, a backpack in one hand and a paper bag in the other. "Got those paints Lily wanted from the art store," he said, setting the backpack on the table. "And stopped at the Italian market for that bread you like." "Ethan," Lily burst from her room, throwing herself into his arms. "You're here." "Promised I would be," Ethan said, catching her easily. "How was school?" While Lily chatted about her day, Sophie watched them as she prepared dinner. This had become their routine over the past 6 weeks. Ethan showing up after work, sharing meals, helping with homework, staying for bedtime stories. Some nights he stayed, others he went back to his own apartment. They were building something slowly, carefully. During dinner, Lily suddenly looked between them with an expression too serious for her young face. "Sarah from school said her dad doesn't live with her," Lily announced, "that he has his own house but comes to visit a lot." She looked at Ethan. "Is that why you don't live here?" Sophie froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. They'd avoided this conversation, not wanting to rush anything. Ethan set down his fork carefully. "Well," he began, "your real dad chose not to be part of your life, which was his choice. I choose to be here whenever I can. But your mum and I are taking things one step at a time." "But you like us," Lily pressed. "I love you," Ethan corrected gently. "Both of you, very much." Tears burned in Sophie's eyes. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. "Then why don't you stay?" Lily asked with the simple logic of childhood. Ethan looked at Sophie, a question in his eyes. Lily, sweetheart, Sophie said carefully, relationships take time. We want to make sure. I'm sure, Lily interrupted. Ethan promised he wouldn't leave, and he always keeps his promises. She looked between them. Adults make things too complicated. After dinner, after Lily was in bed, Sophie found Ethan on the small balcony overlooking the city lights. Sorry about that, she said, leaning against the railing beside him. She has no filter. Don't apologize, Ethan said. She's right. Adults make things complicated. He turned to face her. You know I'm in this, right? Completely. You, Lily, the whole crazy, complicated, beautiful situation. I know, Sophie said softly, and that terrifies me. Me too, Ethan admitted. But I'll tell you something. For years after Aaron died, I felt dead inside. Just going through the motions, building an empire because I didn't know what else to do. His eyes found hers. And then a woman fainted in my boardroom, and suddenly I remembered what it was to feel, to care, to want something beyond numbers on a screen. He took her hands. I'm not rushing you, Sophie. We can go at whatever pace you need. But you need to know, when I look at the future now, I see you. I see Lily. I see Sunday dinners and school presentations and teaching her to ride a bike. I see a life worth living. Sophie felt tears streaming down her face. I spent so long being afraid of needing anyone. And now? Ethan asked softly. Now I realize that strength isn't doing everything alone, Sophie said. It's letting someone stand beside you. She moved closer, resting her forehead against his. Stay, not just tonight. Stay. The smile that spread across Ethan's face was like sunrise breaking. You're sure? Lily's right, Sophie said, laughing through tears. I'm sure. Sophie stood in the same upscale cafe where she'd fainted nearly a year ago, watching Lily, now 8 years old, proudly show Ethan her science project. They'd come to the cafe out of nostalgia, celebrating Crawford Enterprises' anniversary of their most successful product line. Sophie's marketing campaign had broken records, proving to all the skeptics that her success had nothing to do with who she shared a bed with. Mum's making that face again, Lily observed, looking at her. What face? Sophie asked, joining them at the table. The happy, sad face, Lily explained, where you're happy but also look like you're going to cry. Ethan laughed, pulling Sophie closer. Your mum is contemplative. That's a big word, Lily said approvingly. I'll use it at school. As Lily returned to her project, Ethan leaned in and whispered in Sophie's ear. You okay? Was just thinking, Sophie said softly, about how a year ago I walked into this cafe with no idea my whole life was about to change. She looked at him. That I was about to meet someone who would teach me it's okay not to be strong all the time. That letting someone see your weaknesses isn't giving up, it's trusting. Best decision I ever made, Ethan said, not letting you walk away that day. Second best, Sophie corrected, smiling. What was the first? Loving you back. On the horizon, the city stretched before them, full of possibilities, challenges, and the promise of tomorrows they'd face together. Not perfectly, not without stumbles, but together. And sometimes, Sophie thought, as she watched Lily laugh at something Ethan said, sometimes the best stories start with fainting in boardrooms and CEOs who refuse to look away when they see someone struggling. Sometimes the best stories start with the courage to let someone see who you really are. And sometimes, just sometimes, they end with something even better than happy endings. They end with happy beginnings.